So if a divine infinite being exists,
Yeah.
I mean, something that by definition has no boundaries, no beginning and no end, how could you possibly capture its essence in a single word?
Right.
Like, how do you put a name tag on infinity?
Yeah, you're identifying the ultimate philosophical bottleneck right there, because the moment you name something, you are drawing a linguistic box around it.
Exactly.
You're defining what it is, which inherently defines what it is not. Like a tree is not a rock.
Right, right.
But how do you draw a linguistic box around the totality of existence?
And that tension, that desperate historical attempt to find the right box, and exactly what we're exploring today.
It is.
Because we have a massive stack of sources for this deep dive. We're looking at excerpts from G.R.S. Mead's translation of the Gnosis of the Mind, which plunges into Hellenistic Hermetic philosophy.
Fascinating text.
Yeah, and we also have an encyclopedic historical breakdown of the Shem HaMephorash, which is the hidden explicit name of God found in Judaism and later, Western occultism.
It's just a remarkable cross-section of texts because they approach the exact same problem from entirely opposed worldviews.
They really do. And our mission for you listening is to uncover exactly what the 72 names of God are, the cryptographic method ancient scholars use to extract them from biblical texts, and how mystics, magicians, and theologians across centuries have attempted to actually use them.
Yeah.
We are essentially treating these ancient manuscripts like early attempts to find the underlying source code of the universe.
I like that framing. But before we jump into the texts, we should probably establish our lens here.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we are exploring the mechanics of these ideas deeply, right? We're taking the internal logic of the authors seriously.
Right.
But we are doing so through the lens of history, philosophy, and folklore. We are tracking how human beings engaged with the concept of the divine rather than, endorsing the theological claims or the literal magical practices these manuscripts describe.
Yeah, we're not telling anyone to go try and summon an angel in their living room.
Right, exactly. Please don't do that.
So let's start with the paradox of the unnameable. In the excerpts from the Gnosis of the Mind, Mead outlines the Hermetic perspective.
Okay.
And this is a tradition heavily influenced by ancient Greek philosophy and Egyptian thought in Hellenistic Alexandria. Their view is that God has no single name because, and this is how Mead translates it, he is the one of all names. For he is name itself, there is not, that is not he.
Yeah, so the Hermetic tradition approaches the bottleneck by just entirely dissolving it.
Right.
If the divine is everything, then every single utterance, every single name is just a fraction of the divine name.
It's all connected.
Exactly. Within this philosophical framework, the physical universe is quite literally the spoken language of the divine. And the text goes even further with this really striking metaphor.
Oh, yeah, where it says human beings are just letters in the language.
Yes. You
Yeah.
aren't an independent actor. You are a character in a divine alphabet spelling out reality.
Which is wild to think about.
It really is. Everything you do or write is just a single letter of a larger cosmic word.
So the Greeks and Hermetics were, I guess, comfortable with abstract totality.
Oh, very much so. They believed the divine is something you experience and reflect. Attempting to isolate a specific string of syllables to command or define God would be absurd to them.
It's too small.
Right. It would be like a single cell in your body trying to call you by your first name to get your attention.
I mean, that's a great metaphor, but I have a hard time accepting that as a functional philosophy, though.
How so?
Well, if everything is God's name, then practically speaking, nothing is.
I see what you mean.
It's like having a password to a highly secure computer network, but the password is just the entire English dictionary.
That's a great point.
You can't use that. It's too broad to give you access to anything. And that lack of utility is why people inevitably went looking for the explicit name, isn't it?
Yes.
They wanted the exact cryptographic key, not the whole keyboard.
And that desire for utility is the perfect bridge to the Tannaitic Jewish tradition because they took the exact opposite approach.
Right, the Tani.
Yeah, the rabbinic sages who compiled the oral law, the Mishnah, from roughly the 1st to the 3rd centuries CE, they weren't looking for a vague, all-encompassing concept.
No, they wanted specifics.
They were searching for the Shem HaMephorash, which literally translates to the explicit name.
And early on, from that Tannaitic period all the way through to the Geonim, who were the leaders of the Babylonian academies, ruling Jewish law from roughly the 6th to the 11th centuries, that term exclusively referred to the four-letter name of God.
The Tetragrammaton.
Right, YHVH.
See, the Jewish mystical tradition operated on the belief that the specific, exact letters of the Hebrew alphabet were not just, human inventions to record sheep sales or whatever.
Yeah, they were just mundane tools.
Right. They believed the letters themselves were the literal architecture of reality. The letters were the tools of creation.
Wow.
Therefore, the specific four letters of the Tetragrammaton were the most concentrated, potent combination of that creative energy.
But history shows that humans are rarely satisfied with a baseline. The four-letter name was just the starting line, really.
Oh, absolutely.
Over the centuries, the concept of the explicit name escalates in complexity. We don't just jump from 4 letters to the famous 72 letters. The sources outline a whole progression of intermediate sequences.
Yeah, starting with a 12-letter name.
Let's talk about that.
So the 12-letter name is an excellent example of how historical texts capture the confusion of their own eras. It's mentioned in the Talmud, specifically in Tractate B, Kedushin 72a.
And just for you listening, the B simply denotes the Babylonian Talmud, right?
Exactly. And Kedushin is the section dealing heavily with laws of betrothal and marriage, though, the Talmud frequently takes these deep philosophical detours.
As it does.
Right. So it mentions this 12-letter name, but medieval scholars fiercely debated what it actually was.
Because the Talmud didn't just spell it out for them.
No, it left it completely ambiguous.
Right, so some scholars thought the 12-letter name wasn't a mystical sequence at all. They argued it was just a mundane euphemism.
Like a placeholder.
Exactly, a 12-letter placeholder phrase used by the priests to avoid accidentally saying the true, sacred 4-letter name out loud.
While others, of course, tried to reconstruct it mathematically.
Which is where it gets interesting.
Yeah, one prominent theory was that the 12 letters were simply a combination of 3 distinct 4-letter names of God placed back to back. So YHVH, EHYH, and ADNY.
Okay, that makes mathematical sense. 4 times 3 is 12. But the sources bring up another theory from 19th century scholars Wilhelm Bacher and Adolf Fromm.
Yeah.
They suggested the 12-letter name was the sequence Chokmah Tivuna Dat, which translates to wisdom, understanding, and knowledge.
Right, but the historical record actually complicates that theory significantly.
Yeah, why is that?
Well, Bacher and Frank were brilliant scholars, but projecting Chokmah, Tivuna, and Da'at onto a Talmudic text is heavily anachronistic.
Because of the timeline.
Exactly. Those 3 terms are the foundational pillars of the Sephirot, the 10 divine emanations in Kabbalistic theology.
Wait, let me make sure I'm mapping the timeline correctly here for the listener. The Talmud is compiled around the 5th or 6th century.
Right.
But Kabbalah, and specifically the structured doctrine of the Sephirot, doesn't emerge until much later.
Exactly. The formal doctrine of the Sephirot really crystallizes in the 12th and 13th centuries in Provence and Spain.
With texts like the Bahir and the Zohar.
Yes. That is roughly 700 to 800 years after the 12-letter name was first referenced in the Talmud.
That's a massive gap.
It is. You cannot take a 13th century theological framework and use it to decode a 5th century mystery.
That makes total sense.
So the consensus among historians is that the original 12-letter sequence, whatever it actually was genuinely lost.
And the mystery deepens even more when we scale up to the 42-letter name. Because heavyweight medieval scholars, like the 12th century rationalist Maimonides and the 11th century commentator Rashi, they flat out stated that the exact form of the 42-letter name was completely unknown to them.
And it is really worth pausing on Maimonides for a second.
Oh, I know.
He was a strict rationalist. He despised superstition, magical amulets, all of that.
He wasn't a mystic.
Not at all. So for him to even mention the 42-letter name means it was an inescapable part of the tradition he inherited, even if he believed its original form was lost.
He had to address it.
Right. But the mystics of his era strongly disagreed that it was lost.
Yeah. Our sources highlight Hai Gaon, who was also known as Haben Sharira. He was the head of the Pumbedita Academy in Babylon in the early 11th century.
A very prominent figure.
Very. And he claimed something incredibly specific. He said the raw letters of the 42-letter name were still perfectly preserved, but the oral pronunciation of those letters had vanished.
Yes, and he even documented the contemporary debates over the sequence.
Like the exact vowels.
Exactly. Some rabbis argued the 42-letter sequence began with the specific string abitus, while others violently disagreed, arguing it started with the slightly different vocalization abagitus.
And as this sequence travels across the medieval world, it fractures further based on geography, which I find fascinating.
How so?
Well, Solomon ibn Nadred, who was a major rabbi in 13th century Spain, noted that the Sephardic scholars of his region pronounced the 42 letters as 7 distinct words made of 6 letters each.
Oh.
Meanwhile, the Ashkenazic scholars in Germany and France took the exact same 42 letters and sliced them up into 14 words made of 3 letters each.
Think about the underlying assumption of power there.
Yeah.
These communities are fiercely guarding a 42-character string of text. They are debating its microscopic vocalizations while openly admitting they no longer know how to properly speak it aloud.
Incredible.
It reflects a profound belief that the written sequence itself is a piece of sacred technology. The visual, textual data holds inherent power independent of human speech.
It's the ancient equivalent of finding a corrupted computer file or an encrypted hard drive.
Yes, exactly.
We have the raw data, the 42 letters, but we've lost the software, the specific oral pronunciation required to execute the program.
That's a perfect analogy.
So humanity just endlessly preserves the raw data, hoping someone eventually figures out the software to run it.
And the Ashkenazic solution to preserving that raw data was actually brilliant.
What do they do?
They embedded their 14 three-letter words into the liturgy. The most famous survival of this is the liturgical poem Anna Be Coach.
Right.
It's attributed to a first-century rabbi, but was really popularized in the Middle Ages, and the poem is an acrostic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The first letter of every word in the poem spells out the 42-letter name.
That's so smart.
Right. By embedding the code into a beautiful, easily memorizable poem, they ensured the data survived centuries of exile and persecution.
That is just incredible preservation. But before we move to the main cryptography, there is a weird outlier in our sources.
The 22-letter name.
Yes, the 22-letter name. It shows up on amulets discovered in the Cairo Geniza and in a famous magical text called Sefer Raziel Hamalak.
Yeah, the Cairo Geniza is one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 19th century.
For those who might not know, a Geniza is a storage room in a synagogue.
Exactly. It's where worn-out sacred texts containing the name of God are kept before they can be formally buried.
Because you can't just throw them away.
Right. And the Ben Ezra synagogue in Cairo had a Geniza that was sealed and untouched for nearly 1,000 years. Its dry climate preserved over 300,000 manuscript fragments.
Unbelievable. And among those fragments were these amulets bearing a 22-letter name.
Mm-hmm.
But unlike the other names, scholars can't find any linguistic roots for it.
None at all.
It doesn't connect to Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, or Zoroastrian terms.
Yeah.
It's just this bizarre, isolated sequence.
Yeah.
Yet it carried so much mystical weight that a 17th century rabbi named Nathan Hanover actually added it to the solemn priestly blessing liturgy.
Which demonstrates just how syncretic these traditions really are.
Yeah, meaning they just absorb things.
Exactly. A string of characters doesn't necessarily need an etymological history to be deemed powerful. It only needs the patina of ancient mystery.
Just feeling old and secret is enough.
Right.
But the 12, 22, and 42-letter names are really just the foothills here. The absolute summit of this tradition, the ultimate Shem HaMephorash, is the massive 216-letter, 72-fold name of God.
The big one.
The big one. And the way ancient scholars discovered it is a staggering piece of textual cryptography. They didn't find it buried in a desert cave or receive it in a new vision.
No.
They extracted it from the most dramatic moment in the book of Exodus.
Specifically, Exodus chapter 14, verses 19, 20, and 21.
Right. And for context, this is the climax of the Exodus narrative. The Israelites are trapped against the Red Sea, the Egyptian army is closing in behind them, and Moses is about to raise his staff.
The tension is at its absolute peak.
Exactly. And in the original Hebrew text, something mathematically extraordinary happens here. Those 3 consecutive verses 19, 20, and 21 each contain exactly 72 letters.
And in an ancient world that viewed the Hebrew text as the literal architecture of the universe, a numerical anomaly, like 3 consecutive 72-letter verses, is a massive flashing neon sign.
They couldn't ignore it.
Not at all. The early Jewish mystics recognized this as a cipher, but you cannot just read the text linearly to find the code.
Right. You can't just read it left to right or, well, right to left in Hebrew.
Correct. They utilized a very specific extraction method known as boustrophedon.
Boustrophedon. It's such a great word. It's an ancient Greek term that translates to how an ox plows a field.
Going back and forth.
Yeah, turning at the edge of the field.
Picture an ox dragging a plow down a line of soil. It reaches the end of the field, turns around, and plows the next row in the exact opposite direction.
Okay.
Then it turns again and plows the third row in the original direction. This is exactly how the mystics read the 3 verses of Exodus to extract the 72 names.
Okay, let's walk the listener through this grid step by step because the mechanics are fascinating.
Let's do it.
First, you take verse 19 and you write it out normally. Hebrew is read right to left. So you lay out those 72 letters from right to left, forming your first row.
Okay, so you have a row of 72 characters.
Right. Then you take verse 20, but you do not write it normally.
You act like the ox turning around at the end of the field.
Exactly. You write verse 20 backwards, from left to right, directly underneath the first row.
Got it.
And finally, you take verse 21 and you turn the plow again. You write it normally, right to left, underneath the second row.
So you now have a grid.
A perfect grid. It is 3 rows deep and 72 columns wide.
And the extraction happens vertically.
Right.
You read down the columns. Column 1 provides a 3-letter sequence. Column 2 provides the next 3-letter sequence. You read across the grid until you have 72 distinct 3-letter words.
And these 72 columns are the 72 names of God.
That's the code.
And this wasn't some fringe underground theory either. This exact Boustrophedon method is validated by Rashi.
A major authority.
Right. It's referenced in the Talmud, in Tractate Sukkah 45a, and it forms a core part of the Sefer Raziel, which we mentioned earlier as a foundational text of early Kabbalah.
It radically shifts how one views biblical literature.
It really does.
The text ceases to be merely a historical or narrative document. It becomes a multidimensional matrix.
Like a puzzle box.
Exactly. On the surface, the narrative describes Moses performing a miracle, but hidden structurally inside the text is the exact 216-letter spell he supposedly used to execute the miracle.
The narrative contains its own mechanism.
Yes.
But I have to ask about the intentionality here. When you look at 3 verses, each exactly 72 letters long, forming perfect columns, is this just human pattern seeking?
What do you mean?
Like, is this the ancient equivalent of finding faces in the clouds where we just apply math to a consonant-heavy language until a pattern inevitably emerges? Or is the consensus that this was a deliberate literary puzzle left by the authors of the Book of Exodus?
Well, critical biblical scholars lean toward the former.
The faces in the clouds.
Right. If you have a large enough corpus of text, especially in biblical Hebrew, which rarely uses vowels, you will inevitably find numerical symmetries.
Sure. Statistics dictate it.
However, the placement is what gives pause.
Because it's at the Red Sea.
Exactly. 3 exact 72-letter verses occurring precisely at the narrative climax of the foundational myth of the Israelite people is a statistically wild anomaly.
It is pretty convenient.
Right. Whether it was a deliberate cipher designed by ancient scribes or an incredibly fortunate coincidence that later mystics brilliantly reverse-engineered, the result was the same.
It cemented the belief that the Torah was an artifact of immense objective power.
Which brings us to the inevitable question. Once these mystics extracted these 72 3-letter names from the Red Sea Matrix, what did they actually do with them?
Right. How do you use the code once you have it?
So the folklore asserts that while Moses utilized the entire 72-fold name for a macro-level miracle like parting a sea,
Right.
Later mystics used individual 3-letter names for micro-level manipulation of reality.
So they broke it down into smaller tools.
Yes. The sources indicate the names were used to cast out demons, heal severe illnesses, prevent natural disasters, and in certain darker traditions, curse enemies.
Now, to understand how they thought a 3-letter word could heal a sickness, we have to look at a concept called emanation, which our sources highlight through the work of scholar G. Lloyd Jones.
Right. Emanation.
And emanation is a tough concept for modern minds.
It is, yeah. It has roots in Neoplatonism. Imagine the divine as a blindingly bright, impossibly hot central fire.
Yeah.
If you stand too close, you are incinerated by the sheer infinity of it. The physical universe, our world of dirt and flesh, is very far away from that fire. It only receives a dim, diluted warmth.
That makes sense.
Emanation theory posits that the space between the infinite fire and our physical dirt is not empty.
There are layers.
Exactly. It is filled with descending spheres or layers of reality, each governed by specific intermediaries, angels, or forces that step down the raw power of the divine into a manageable form.
Like electrical transformers, stepping down high voltage for a house.
Perfect analogy.
So God doesn't reach down and interact with the physical world directly. The power cascades down through these intermediaries.
Yes.
And Jones points out that language is the mechanism of contact. By manipulating the Hebrew alphabet, specifically the 72 names, a mystic utilizes sympathetic resonance.
They speak the specific frequency of a specific celestial intermediary to command a specific physical result.
It's just fascinating.
Oh.
And the most enduring cultural manifestation of this mechanic is the legend of the Golem of Prague.
Oh, absolutely.
It is arguably the most famous piece of Jewish folklore in the world.
Yeah, the legend centers around a 16th century Rabbi Judah Loew ben Bezalel.
Right.
His community was under threat, so he went down to the banks of the Vltava River and sculpted a massive humanoid figure out of the river mud.
But the mud is just inanimate matter.
Exactly.
You can sculpt it perfectly, but it remains lifeless. The ritual of animation required the explicit name.
The Shem HaMephorash.
Right. The rabbi had to write it on a piece of parchment and place it into the mouth of the clay figure, or in some versions, inscribe it directly onto its forehead.
Only then would the mud breathe and follow commands.
I love looking at this through the lens of modern computing.
Oh, the hardware analogy.
Yes, the clay body of the golem is just hardware. It's an unpowered machine. The parchment bearing the name of God is the USB drive containing the boot-up sequence.
That works so well.
You plug the name into the hardware, the operating system loads, and the mud becomes a functioning entity. The name isn't just a label. It is the operating system of reality.
And that analogy holds up perfectly against the Hermetic philosophy we discussed at the very beginning.
With the whole weird letters in the language thing.
Exactly. Remember Mead's translation. The mind creates reality, and words are the expressions of that mind.
Right.
If human beings are just letters in the language of reality, then possessing the ultimate word grants you administrative access.
You literally have the admin password.
You are no longer just a letter. You are speaking the language of the programmer.
It's no wonder this concept captivated modern writers. Our sources detail how the great 20th century Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges was deeply obsessed with this.
He was.
He wove the golem and the explicit name into his essays and poems. In stories like The Circular Ruins and Three Versions of Judas, Borges wrestles with the terrifying philosophical implications of a single word that contains the entire architecture of the universe.
Because Borges understood that the search for the name was ultimately a search for control over the chaos of existence.
Controls what everyone wants.
Right. And while 20th century writers explored it as a literary metaphor, a completely different group of scholars in the Renaissance got their hands on the 72 names and radically altered their function.
Yes, the birth of the Christian Kabbalah.
A huge shift.
During the Renaissance, Christian humanist scholars became fascinated by Jewish mysticism. They believed these ancient Hebrew texts might contain universal truths that predated Christianity, but could be used to prove Christian theology.
And the primary architect of this shift was a German scholar named Johann Reuchlin.
In 1517, Reuchlin published a highly influential treatise called De Arte Kabbalistica.
Yeah.
He had studied the Boustrophedon extraction method from Exodus. He generated the 72 three-letter columns. But as a European scholar trying to put this system into practice, he hit a massive linguistic roadblock.
A very practical roadblock.
Very practical. The roadblock is that Hebrew is a consonantal language. Many of those 72 three-letter columns were just strings of consonants with no obvious vowel sounds.
They were practically unpronounceable.
Right. You can't speak a word of power if your tongue literally cannot form the syllables.
Yeah.
So Reuchlin decides to innovate.
He took the 72 raw three-letter roots extracted from Exodus and appended divine suffixes to them.
Okay, what kind of suffixes?
Specifically, he added either El or Yah to the end of every sequence. In Hebrew, El denotes power or God, and Yah denotes mercy or God.
And this single grammatical tweak is a monumental theological pivot.
Oh, it changes everything.
Because by adding those suffixes to make the roots pronounceable, Reuchlin fundamentally changes what the names are.
Exactly.
They cease to be 72 variations of God's name. They become the names of 72 distinct individual angels.
And the scholar Bernd Rolling provides excellent context here. He notes that Reuchlin viewed these newly christened angels as individuated products of the will of God.
What does that mean practically?
It means the sheer, terrifying, infinite nature of God is too vast for the human mind to grasp or communicate with.
Right, the incinerating fire we talked about.
Exactly. So by fracturing the divine name into 72 addressable angels, Reuchlin believed he was providing humanity with a spiritual ladder. It gave people a structured, manageable way to ascend back to the divine.
Let's ground this by looking at Reuchlin's actual list. He takes a three-letter root from the Exodus grid, adds a suffix, and categorizes the result.
Give us an example.
So name number 1 on the list becomes the angel Vawaya, who is assigned to the choir of seraphim. Name number 42 becomes Michael. an angel most people recognize, categorized as a virtue. And name number 72 becomes the angel Mumia.
So Reuchlin basically turns a cryptographic mystery into an organized bureaucracy.
He really does.
He democratizes access to the celestial realms. Instead of shouting into the infinite void, a practitioner now has a specific named intermediary they can call upon.
Like an API for the divine.
Yes, an API is a great way to put it.
But I understand the practical appeal of an API, but I have to challenge Reuchlin's methodology here.
What's the issue?
Doesn't appending El and Yah fundamentally corrupt the original source code?
Ah.
I mean, if the Jewish mystics believe the exact 216 letters extracted from Exodus were the unalterable architecture of reality, modifying them just so a Renaissance scholar could pronounce them feels like hacking the system to fit a completely different worldview.
It is absolutely a hack.
Right.
And it perfectly illustrates the divergence between the traditions. The Jewish mystical approach was deeply textual and structural. Altering the letters was akin to altering physics.
You just don't do it.
Exactly. But Reuchlin's Christian Kabbalist approach was focused on systemic theology and personal spiritual mechanics.
So he didn't care about the physics.
Not in the same way. He wasn't concerned with preserving the structural integrity of the code. He wanted to activate it. He needed it to work within a framework of angelic intercession.
Well, once he activated it and published a list of 72 powerful named angels, it didn't stay confined to polite theological debate.
Oh, not at all.
It was swiftly weaponized.
Yeah.
Because the moment you publish a hierarchy of angels, the occultists and magicians of the early modern period are going to use it for cosmic warfare.
Yes. And this brings us squarely into the realm of Hermetic Kabbalah and the infamous magical grimoires.
The spell books.
Right. And the most crucial text for this development is the Lesser Key of Solomon, specifically its first section, known as the Ars Goetia.
And the Goetia is essentially the definitive encyclopedia of Renaissance demonology.
It is.
It meticulously catalogs 72 evil spirits, listing their ranks, their sigils, and the legions of lesser demons they command.
And notice the math there.
Yeah.
You have Reuchlin's wildly popular list of 72 angels derived from Exodus, and you have the Goetia's terrifying list of 72 demons from the depths of hell.
So you have 72 of each.
Exactly. The occult scholars of the 17th century immediately saw a cosmic puzzle waiting to be solved, and a scholar named Thomas Rudd formalized the connection.
What did he propose?
Rudd proposed that Reuchlin's 72 angels of the Shem HaMephorash were the exact, specific balancing forces required to bind and control the 72 demons of the Goetia.
Wow. So it's a one-to-one cosmic matchup.
Yes. According to Rudd's system, you cannot use a generic prayer to banish a demon. You must use the corresponding opposing force.
Give me an example of how that works.
Okay, so the first angel on Reuchlin's list, Vahuya, is the only entity mathematically capable of ruling over and binding the first demon of the Goetia, King Baal.
Interesting.
And the third angel, Sithala, is the specific countermeasure to the third demon, Visago.
It is the ultimate expression of cosmic symmetry. It's like matter and antimatter.
Yeah.
If demon number 3 breaches reality, you deploy angel number 3 to annihilate it.
Precisely.
Or, thinking back to our earlier medical analogy, it is like creating a highly specific antivenom for a very specific snake bite.
That's a great way to think of it.
Broad-spectrum antibiotics won't work. You need the exact 3-letter angelic root to neutralize the exact demonic poison.
Because Western esotericism was deeply uncomfortable with unchecked chaos.
They needed order.
They desperately needed order. The pairing of the 72 angels with the 72 demons was an attempt to turn messy, terrifying spiritual warfare into a perfectly balanced equation of cosmic physics. Every dark action has an equal and opposite divine reaction.
And this obsession with mathematical precision and cosmic symmetry reached its absolute zenith in the late 19th century with the occult revival.
Yes, specifically with a man named Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers.
And the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
Right. Mathers was attempting a grand unification theory of Western esoteric thought.
He wanted to tie it all together.
Exactly. He wanted to seamlessly weave the Kabbalah, Hermeticism, tarot, and biblical apocalyptic literature into one cohesive, mathematically sound system.
That's ambitious.
Very. And to justify the supreme importance of the 72 names, Mathers deployed an incredibly convoluted numerological proof.
Okay, I am going to admit total confusion on the logic leaps Mathers makes here, so walk with me through his math.
Let's do it. So he starts with the standard 4-letter tetragrammaton, YHVH.
Okay, the baseline 4 letters.
Right. Then he brings in a second four-letter name of God, Adni, which is Adonai.
Adonai. Good.
He claims Adonai is the key to unlocking YHVH.
Okay, so how does he combine them?
Mathers binds those two distinct four-letter names together, creating an 8-letter sequence.
Simple enough. 4 plus 4 is 8.
Right. He then turns to the Kabbalistic tree of life, specifically the top 3 spheres known as the supernal triad.
Okay.
He multiplies his 8-letter sequence by the 3 spheres of the supernal triad. 8 times 3 equals 24.
Okay, and this is where he jumps to the New Testament.
Yes.
Because he claims that the number 24 directly corresponds to the book of Revelation. Specifically, the 24 thrones occupied by the elders of the apocalypse who surround the throne of God.
That's his leap. But he still needs to get to 72.
Right, he's only at 24.
So he looks closer at the imagery of Revelation. He posits that each of those 24 apocalyptic elders wears a golden crown. And each of those 24 crowns emits exactly 3 rays of divine light.
3 rays.
24 elders multiplied by the 3 rays of their crowns brings you mathematically back to exactly 72.
Wow.
Yeah. And Mathers calls these 72 names the ladder of Jacob, referencing the biblical dream where angels ascend and descend between heaven and earth.
So for Mathers, the 72 extracted names weren't just titles.
No, they were the literal mathematical rungs of the ladder, bridging the physical and the infinite.
It is an astonishing, if entirely fabricated feat of esoteric synthesis.
It really is.
Mathers forces Exodus, Revelation, Kabbalistic spheres, and angelic hierarchies into a single unified equation.
The logic leaps are massive, yes. But the goal was to prove that the universe operates on a hidden, quantifiable, and manipulatable mathematical code.
Stepping back from the math of the Golden Dawn, this entire journey is staggering.
It is a lot to take in.
We started with a Hermetic philosophical belief that the entire universe is the name of God.
Right.
We moved to Jewish mystics, extracting perfect 72-letter grids from the Red Sea narrative, like ancient cryptographers.
The booster Fidon.
Then we saw Renaissance scholars like Reuchlin hack the code with suffixes to create angels.
Turning them into APIs.
Exactly. And then magicians like Thomas Rudd pair them up like antimatter to bind demons.
It is a remarkable centuries-long relay race across completely different cultures.
Yeah.
All centered around a single obsession, finding the correct sequence of letters to explain reality.
But if we strip away the amulets, the golems, and the grimoires, what does this centuries-long obsession with finding the perfect string of characters actually mean for us today?
I think we have to return to that beautiful Gnostic concept from Mead's translation, the idea that humanity is just a series of letters spelling out a larger reality.
Yeah.
Because this relentless historical hunt for the 72 names isn't just about finding a magic spell to part a sea or banish a spirit. It is about a fundamental human intuition that reality is constructed of information.
Information.
Right. Think about how we operate today. We map the entirety of human biological destiny, the human genome, using a sequence of just 4 chemical letters, A, C, T, and G.
Oh, wow.
By manipulating those 4 letters, we attempt to cure disease and alter life itself.
That's true.
We build vast, immersive virtual realities using endless sequences of ones and zero.
Binary code.
Exactly. The ancient mystics were attempting to do the exact same thing with the Hebrew alphabet. They believed that existence had an underlying syntax, a foundational code.
They just wanted the code.
They believed that if you could just discover the exact correct sequence, you could understand and perhaps control the universe.
That is profound. We really haven't changed our underlying behavior at all.
Not really.
We are still frantically looking for the underlying code of reality, tearing it apart, looking for the exact mechanism. We've just traded the Kabbalistic texts for quantum physics and genetic sequencing.
The human drive remains identical. We refuse to accept that the universe is just chaos.
We need order.
We want to know how the machine works. We want the root access code. So consider this. As we sequence genomes and build artificial intelligences out of binary code, are we really doing anything conceptually new?
That's a great question.
Or are we, in our own modern, hyper-scientific way, still just desperately searching for the Shem HaMephorash?
The search for the root access code continues. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope it gave you some amazing new perspectives on how humanity has tried to decode the infinite. Until next time, keep questioning the reality around you.